And we're live. Thanks for coming. We're going to talk about the 48 Laws of Power, Law Number 1 by Robert Greene. Let me tell you, I've worked most of my life in different corporations, and I've seen Law Number 1 play out so many times. Law Number 1 from the 48 Laws of Power is never outshine the master. Never outshine the master. What does that mean? What does that mean in a business setting, in a corporate setting, or even in like an apprenticeship or a partnership? Somebody is always the master, okay? So, your boss in a work setting is the master, according to Robert Greene. He has the ability to fire you. He has the ability to hire you, to promote you, to demote you, whatever the case. And when he talks about Robert Greene, talks about never outshine him, what he's referring to is to know your place, to understand the laws, the 48 Laws of Power, which is an amazing book. Understand that in law number 1, no matter how much you want to show your skills to your boss, to your teammates, no matter how much you want to impress potentially, or maybe you just have a high skill set, have an understanding that you have the potential to outshine and outperform and look better than your boss. And if that happens in a corporate setting, in a business setting, you are now at risk of potentially being fired, let go, demoted, all those things we talked about. Why? Why is it? Because there's a power dynamic. Because some people maybe feel insecure. They might be the boss and they worked really hard to get there, or they might be a manager and they worked really hard to get there, but they might be insecure. Or maybe they were just kind of given that position as manager and they know it. And so they may be insecure that you are a rising star and you could replace them. Because there's always somebody above you, right? In a corporate setting. And I'm talking specifically corporations, businesses, because, Robert Greene in the book, he talks about the times of the Henry VIII and the courtships and the courts, and he talks about different ancient times and medieval times and Renaissance and he shows how it was used back then. But all you have to do is look at the existing organization that you're a part of, and I guarantee you there are elements of this law in place. Now, I got introduced to Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power while this must have been in the year 2017, somewhere around that. I was 27 or so. Maybe 26, in that range, 2016, 2017. And I just soaked it all up, because when you do the audiobook or you read that book, you realize that even though the stories that he's using history to tell these stories and prove these laws, you can take your current setting and apply it to current setting, and you'll see it being used. So law number 1, never outshine the master. I was working for a corporation, and I was in a business, and I worked with a lot of different managers and a lot of different offices, and I was doing sales. And there were elements where I saw that a manager potentially wanted to take credit for some of the things that one of the staff was doing, or sometimes one of the things that I would introduce as an idea. They wanted to take the credit. They wanted to take it to the boss. They wanted to show that they were the one who, under him this idea was developed, or under her this idea was developed. And I found that very interesting, because that's that power dynamic. If, let's say, a manager has some of the team members in the office, and one of them comes up with this amazing idea to help better the organization, and they go directly to the boss, you're stepping on some toes. You potentially could be seen as outshining your master, which would be your manager, let's say, in your office. And so those are the different things that happen. Now, in sales, it's interesting, because in sales, you want to sell the most. You want to do the best thing for the client. You want to sell the most. You want to make the most money. So potentially, can you outshine the masters? And what I noticed was, when I was working for one corporation in California, I noticed it was a very, very large company, insurance company in the state of California. And I've worked for several insurance companies over the years. The masters were the managers and the people that were in corporate. And the salespeople were actually seen as under the managers. The managers had the ability to make you shine a little more, put you up on a stage, have you, connect with new partnerships that meant more money for you. The managers were playing chess. And if you were a salesperson that had exceptional numbers, it's hard to argue that with that person, right? It's hard to argue that, but how can you have someone above you if you have exceptional numbers? You're making more money than the managers are. Well, the master didn't necessarily mean making more money. The master was the person who had the power to make or break you. Now, again, I've worked in large corporations my whole life, and I'm now 32. And I started when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. So I have seen that power dynamic, that no matter how much money a salesperson was making, you can't outshine the management in the corporate level that had more power over you. If they wanted to, if you started stepping on some toes and they wanted to send people to review your, the compliance, review things that you were doing, and making sure that, they could have made your life a little bit miserable. So they had that power position. And that's one of the things that I really liked about this law. Is that it doesn't mean don't do well. It doesn't mean don't show that you have talent and shine in that sense. But it's, in my opinion, what Robert Greene is trying to say is that understand that if you do it in a fashion where maybe you're like showing off, and you're just showing that you know more than maybe the person who has a power position above you, you stand a risk. And that's one of the things that in the corporate setting you have to be aware of. The corporate setting is a dog-eat-dog world. The corporate setting is survival of the fittest. The corporate setting is taking credit from people. The corporate setting can be ugly if you don't know how to maneuver it. And there's a lot of manipulation and persuasion, and that's why I think this particular law is really powerful. And I think that look at your life and look at what, dynamics are in your life, whether it could be like your father's, it could be a power position with, let's say, a teacher. It could be a power position with a manager, a boss, a partnership. Somebody always has that power position. If they feel threatened, if your teacher feels threatened by something you're doing in the class, that you could potentially report them, that you could potentially somehow call them out on something. Be very, very careful. And I think Robert Greene nails it with this law number one. And I definitely recommend going into the other laws and reading the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. But I will leave you with this one last thing. At the beginning of the book, Robert Greene says, these rules, these laws can change your outlook on life and will change your outlook on life. And you are going to look at life much differently than the way you looked at it before reading these 48 laws. If you don't want to look at life that way, if you don't want to have maybe your view on life completely shifted and changed, don't read this book. I like how he opens up with that, because you begin to see these laws of power in place in any relationship setting, business, outside of business. You see it, and it does affect how you look at life. But if you're somebody who wants to keep learning and understand how to play the game of chess and move up in a corporation or in life, it could be a really, really useful tool. And then you just use it as you see fit. That's my 2 cents on it. Hope you guys check into that book, and I'll link it below. Maybe you guys want to give it a read. Take care, guys.